Okay.
Actually, you should move closer to the audio because we actually want to hear it.
You want to switch?
All right.
Here, you record.
Yeah, hold it steady, AJ.
Look, AJ got a new job.
Okay.
You're covering up the
So
microphone.
Scott,
With your
let's
right
start
hand.
it off.
Hold on. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by AJ Stringham of Crazy AJs. AJ will be our cameraman tonight. Everybody thank AJ.
Thank you, AJ. Thanks, AJ.
My name is Scott Allen Miller. We're doing an Ask Me Anything, which means really you can ask me anything. For those who wonder, I'm doing it for the video because everybody else already heard this. So topics, for example, I work in all aspects of IT, including software engineering, so you can keep it pretty broad from a technical standpoint. If you want to ask about architecture or risk mitigation or systems administration or networking or trends or historical or whatever, feel free. And if you want to talk about other things such as career development, education, opportunities in the field, whatever, work-life balance, all kinds of things. It's an open forum. And Mike, you have the first question.
Actually, I'm going to speak on Tyler's behalf because I'm betting that he's not going to speak up. Typical IT guy. So, he's going to the Cuban Onondaga BOCES program. They've got a solid program there. I say that because I'm on the advisory board.
Oh.
And no, I know the instructor. They got a good program there, a lot of cool gear. They've got the freedom to try different stuff. So they've got Raspberry Pi and they've got Dell SAN. You know, they get it and everything in between. So he's not exactly sure what aspect of IT he wants to get into. He thinks virtualization is kind of cool. How does he figure out where he should, which direction he should go in?
Okay.
Did I summarize it?
Is that a question? Was that actually a question, or are you just getting hoisted on? Okay. So it's a tough one, right? The most important thing, I think, in designing your career, right? And you have kind of three stages. You have to come up with an immediate path. What are you going to do tomorrow? Because you have to act on it. And one of the most important things in IT, well, in any career, is getting the ball rolling. Even if it's in the wrong direction and you have to adjust later, you want to get things going because you start to develop the experience. Even if it's not exactly the experience you want, you develop that experience. And even if it's not you decide to go in one path and then you change that direction later, that's fine. Especially in IT, this is a field that has lateral moves all the time. In fact, there's some lateral moves that are so common that people almost expect them. One of those is going into help desk. People expect that systems administrators will go help desk and then go systems administration. Those are not related paths, and that's not actually how you go from one to the other. You can go straight into systems administration. A little bit harder, but it can be done. The difficulty, and everybody faces this, even people who've been in the field for a very long time, is really knowing what it is that you're passionate about. And finding that is really important because you will excel even in let's just say you really like systems administration, and even if networking administration is a much better field from a career standpoint, right, there's more demand or whatever, if you're passionate about systems administration, if it makes you happy and you go home at night and you want to do more because it's just such a fun job, you will do better at it than even if you were in a field or a part of the field that was in higher demand. You may give up some flexibility, not with systems administration in particular, but the passion that you feel will be significant both in how well you do in your career and in how happy you are with it in life. And so discovering that is key. Now, how do you discover that, which is the real question, is tough. One of the things I always recommend to people is whenever possible, and almost everything in IT falls into this category, you can do it at home, right? So this equally applies to someone who's looking at new career paths versus people who may be in established career paths but are wondering if what they're doing may not be their long-term goal or just not the thing they want, maybe they don't want to do anything forever, they just want to change things up. I've always been very passionate about and found that from a career standpoint, very few things are as impactful as if you take your work home and treat your home life, your lab, your time at home, as more important than any education that you do, as more than your job. You can, for example, if you're doing network administration, that's what you've done in school or you're doing at a job, you can go home and learn systems administration. You can build a lab that puts almost any company to shame for relatively little money. There's nothing you really can't do at home in IT. you can go home and build that experience, and it's not quite the same as building that experience with a company as a job, but in some ways it's more valuable. And once you add in a job, once you manage to get that first job, the combination will take you that much farther faster. Doing that allows you to, let's just say, Windows administration. So you've never done Windows administration for servers. You can go home and build a Windows Server Lab. You can go through Windows certification stuff. It's a great path for just, forcing you to learn things that the industry expects you to know. And by doing that, you get a really good feel for what day-to-day tasks are likely like. You can get a feel for what technical hurdles you're going to run into. You're going to run into what other ancillary technologies are going to be a part of that. You've never done it before. You might not realize that you're going to be working with servers and out-of-band management interfaces and, oh gosh, PowerShell scripting. Who would have guessed, right? A lot of people talk about it. They don't even think about that. That might be a big thing. You don't like scripting? Maybe this isn't the field, right? You get a great opportunity to expand your knowledge, discover if you like it or not. If you like it, work towards finding a job in that, right? And then you get more experience of whether or not you like that or not. You can keep trying different things. I've been in IT for 27 years. One of the things I did is I started off in software engineering. Did that for a number of years, loved it, right? But ended up getting thrown into Unix administration about 5 years into my career. Really enjoyed that. Ended up doing a couple different things. Got into manufacturing. It was okay. Ended up doing just lots and lots of different fields over the years. A lot of it was opportunistic, but it gave me a really broad spectrum. And so I know that there are things I really enjoy and things I enjoy a little bit less. I'm one of the lucky ones. I tend to enjoy almost anything, so I'm pretty happy wherever I am. But you can get that broad base at home, and with a certain amount of effort moving between different jobs or careers within one job. If you end up in a Fortune 500, they may move you around to let you see different things, then you're getting really lucky. But by doing that, you can really define to you what's a good path and take that forward. Now, I mentioned the 3 parts. One of it is, what do you do tomorrow, right? So that may be for the next year, I'm going to work on getting, maybe I'm going to get into help desk because it's what I'm prepared to do, it's what I'm trained on, it's what I'm qualified for. I'm going to get into help desk and get a year under my belt while I'm doing stuff at home. But my goal is after 1 year of help desk, I have a 3-year plan where I'm going to get into junior systems administration, and so I'm gonna have this path lined out in my mind. I'm gonna start working towards it. You can always change that plan later, but you have something to work towards. You don't want to be floundering. You get to that 1 year mark, and you start going after that job. You have the things that you felt you needed to have your resume ready. You go after that job. That's a 3-year plan, hopefully, right? It may not be staying at one job for 3 years, but it's 3 years of you want to be moving from junior to full systems administrator. And then you have a long-term plan, which may be, I really want to be a CIO, right? Which is not for everyone, trust me. But maybe that's what you want to do, and so you need to be thinking about things in your career that will eventually take you there, but you need a plan that is actionable today, and a path to be working towards tomorrow, and an end goal. And all those things can change, adjust them as you go, but you need to have them, or you will just do random things, or worse, you will do nothing.
So you're very outspoken about what a job title is, or job descriptions. For example, on ML there was one today where
You gotta take a time out. For anybody that doesn't know ML, that's Mangalassi. It's a Mangalassi IT. It's another website, kind of like SpiceCorps, but a lot of very active pros on there. So, okay.
So, anyways, you're very outspoken about what a job position is, whether it's systems administration or it's help desk or it's just something that's complete bullshit. How do you define systems administration versus, say, network administration versus, say, what I'm currently doing right now, which you understand what I'm doing right now, which is everything under the sun,
Right.
where I touch everything in the organization that I'm for, but it's a single business.
Right. Okay, so common job titles, this is always a tough one. So the easiest thing to address is what you're doing, right? And what you're doing has no title, and this is the toughest part, right? But what you are is an IT generalist, and most of us in the SMB are IT generalists. SMBs only hire IT generalists. And what IT generalists generally do is desktop support, a small amount, and by small amount I mean percentages of the things I do pie, systems administration, application support, normally a tiny sliver of network administration, very junior network administration, very minor, less than 1%. documentation, and then there's a lot of variance by industry or by individual company. An individual company may have you doing, suddenly you have all kinds of SharePoint at one job. Then you move to another job, they don't have SharePoint, and you spend all of your time running machine controllers, right? And so generalists tend to have like a 75% overlapping, we all do pretty much the same thing, and then a 25% completely random by the job you take, and you just never know what it'll be. That's kind of what a generalist looks like in the SMB space. Generalists basically don't exist in the enterprise space until you get to the management ranks or to the very, very senior leadership ranks. What's weird, so it's weird, generalists have this huge segment in the SMB and then a gap, and then suddenly they reappear at like CIO level. And so CIOs are almost always, once you're looking at 7-figure jobs in IT, they're almost exclusively generalists. But they're really, really few and far between and hard to get to, and there is no path from these generalists to these generalists without going through the enterprise specialist space. And so what happens is either people don't come into SMB generalists or they go straight to specialists and they hop through the specialist fields very quickly to establish themselves into a generalist role within the enterprise space. And I'm going to give a really wacky example that only those who are really old and into obscure video games will get. But back in 1986, Electronic Arts released a video game called The Bard's Tale. Anyone old enough to know? Okay, I got 2 nods, 3 nods. In The Bard's Tale, there was this, for magic users, you could choose to become a mage or you could choose to become a conjurer. You had to work your way through that path. Once you got to a certain level, you were allowed to change to a different job. So if you were a mage and you worked your way up, you then had the right to become a conjurer. Or because you had already done either mage or conjurer, you also could choose sorcerer, which is a different career path, but it required you doing one of these 2 base ones. If you did any combination of 2, either mage and conjurer, mage and sorcerer, conjurer and sorcerer, you then had the right to go after the wizard class, because it required at least 2 of the others. And you could then go through and do each of them and go after the archmage. And I think of a lot of things within IT like this system, right? If you want to become the archmage, if you want to become a CIO or a similar type ultra generalist role, you gotta work, you gotta pay your dues over and over, like you're starting over your career several times. You have to be a master at systems administration. You have to be a master at network administration. You have to understand database administration. Maybe you haven't worked in it. You have to understand desktop support. You have to understand the call center. You have to understand VoIP. You have to understand storage. You have to understand software engineering and lots of other little things that float around. Without all of those, you will never have a serious conversation at getting through the door to any of the senior generalist roles. But each of the underlying things, you have paths to go after them. And it's a matter of, do I want to stay a mage? Do I want to stay a conjurer and just stay focused and get really, really good at this one thing? Or do I want to get pretty good and move on to the next thing? And you can still go back and use those skills, but generally you're building up multiple careers in order to lead to the final thing. That's a talk on generalists. So the SMB space, we don't have a good title for those. There really should be called SMB IT generalists. The old term that we had in the late 90s was called a LAN admin, which referred to, they managed the LAN and everything on it. It was a halfway decent term and it fell away and no one uses it anymore. Most terms in the SMB are now made up and very, very bad because they are copied from the enterprise space in ways that make SMB people unable to apply to jobs in the enterprise space. So the core use of titles, and there are tricks to fixing this if you're in a spot where you can't control it officially. The use of inappropriate titles in the SMB space is functionally a glass ceiling to SMB workers moving into the enterprise, right? Enterprise hiring managers will throw out resumes with fake job titles or with SMB modified job titles. So, our cameraman is tired. So in the specialist space, which is almost exclusively in the enterprise, the Fortune 1,000, maybe larger, maybe the Fortune 5,000, right? Fairly big companies, medium-sized companies, those with a few thousand employees start to get into these, or really, really ultra-rich companies with like over 1,000. But under 1,000 will never happen. Specialist roles like systems administration. Well, first of all, systems, right? Systems should tell you what it is. Systems refers to operating systems. If you run systems, that means that you are administering operating systems. Windows, Linux, Solaris, AIX. a systems administrator should have their job title in some way include, or a description following it say, what systems they manage, right? You work for an enterprise, you would never say I'm a systems administrator unless you're talking to someone outside the field. You would always say, I'm a Solaris administrator, or I'm a Solaris 11 administrator, or I'm a, it starts to get very specific because your knowledge is very, very specific. Sometimes you get people in groups, you might be a Unix administrator, generally not. Generally you're gonna be so specific that it's, I do FreeBSD, or I do Solaris, or I do Windows, right? It's very, very specific. And then administrator versus engineer are real title differences. An administrator can also be called operations. That role is the person who works on live systems. If you administer systems, these are the ones who are on call 24/7. These are the people who have to have an operational mindset, who have to understand what the status of their backups are, who have to know the workloads, who have to know the users, who have to know the business people to report to, who have to know who's going to sign off on what. You have to know what hours of operations are going on. You have to know when you can make a change and who's going to be affected at all times. Those are your administrators. They should be, but are not always, the highest paid people within the systems within the systems organization, because they are the ones who, when the fire hits, have to put it out. They are the ones who matter. Engineers, let me back up. Administrators are they are an availability-based job. Your primary value is in being available when you are needed, right? An engineer is the opposite. The engineer designs and builds the systems that administrators will operate. Engineers are not based on availability. You could care less when your engineers are available. Your engineers are productivity-based. You want to know how much work they can turn out, and you don't care how they do it. They can stand on their head, they can do it underwater, they can do it at midnight, they can do it from France. You don't care. What you care about is how much they produce. You don't care if you can reach them, talk to them, or anything, because that's not important. And they should be, in general, paid less than administrators because they are not on call, should not be on call, and do not, give me a funny look. Are you falling asleep? Okay. Because their job is different, right? Administrators are the highest criticality in your business. And there's a reason why, in really healthy large companies, systems administration is the highest paid title there is in any specialty before you hit the super generalist titles. Right? There may be really unique one-off exceptions to that, like you might work in a very secure government agency and they have a security role that's paid more, but it's still specific. But the average systems administration comes in at between 25 and 100% higher than any other job title at the highest echelons. Network administrator, same basic thing. The network people are the people who manage the network, meaning they manage the equipment that builds the network, switches, routers, firewalls, and just like the systems people, when you get into the high ranges, it's all scripting, it's all central administration, it's all, right? And again, administration, it's who runs the live system. Engineers, it's who designs it for the other people to run. Typically, your administration organization, rough numbers. I worked for the world's largest bank, a single team for a single business unit, 80 systems administrators for a single operating system, 10 engineers, right? And that was probably overkill, right? They did a lot that they didn't need to do in engineering. So 8 to 1 or even 20 to 1 is a very reasonable thing. You don't normally have very many engineers. Administrators are the bread and butter. They're the ones that have to have shifts. Or on calls or whatever, and pagers. Database, this is one that throws people off a lot. Database administration is a real job title. It is shrinking. It is not a great career to go into unless you're incredibly passionate about it and you can't resist it, in which case it's worth it. But DBAs are a very real job title. They're the people, they do systems administration type work, except on database systems specifically. They don't manage the operating system on which the database runs. They don't manage the storage. They manage the database. So titles include Oracle Systems Database Administrator, Microsoft SQL Server Database Administrator, MySQL Database Administrator, MariaDB, whatever. You're specific to the database, and often you might do 2 or 3 and not be limited to 1. Systems and network are the 2 really biggest. Desktop people are generally not considered systems, even though they're managing the desktop operating system. They're generally so tied to the hardware and the end users that it's considered a different thing. Systems administrators are hands-off. In a serious, large enterprise, a systems administrator would never see the service that they touch. They may not even be in the same country. Right? It just doesn't happen.
I thought you were waving. Did I bring you anything in here?
Bud Light.
Do it.
I'll take another 1911.